Have you ever noticed how your best ideas don't show up when you're trying to force them? They appear in the shower, during a quiet walk, or when you're staring blankly into space. They visit you not when you're thinking hard, but when you're not thinking at all. We live in a world addicted to noise, alarms, notifications, deadlines, meetings, to-do lists. From the moment we wake up, we're bombarded with stimulation. Attention has become a scarce resource, and silence, true silence, is almost extinct. We are constantly connected, constantly scrolling, constantly doing. And yet, the more we try to be productive, the more our creativity seems to shut down. That's the paradox, because we've been taught that creativity comes from doing more, pushing harder, thinking faster, staying busy. But the human brain doesn't work well under constant pressure. It needs space. It needs pause. It needs what the Japanese call ma jian, is a word that doesn't have a direct equivalent in English. It loosely translates to the space between things, but it's not just an empty gap. Ma is an intentional living space, a pause that gives meaning to what surrounds it, a silence that's full of potential. In the Japanese language, the character for Ma is made up of two elements, gate and sun. Together, they represent sunlight streaming through a doorway, light filtering through an opening. That's what Ma is. It's not a void. It's the space that allows light to pass through. In Western culture, we often celebrate what fills the space: words, objects, actions. In Japanese culture, there's deep reverence for what's not there, for the unseen, the unspoken, the empty space that gives form to everything else. A pause between two lines of a poem, a blank space in a painting, the breath between movements. In a tea ceremony, that is Ma, and once you notice it, you begin to feel its presence everywhere, even in music. It's not the notes that create rhythm, it's the space between them. In speech, it's the silence that makes the words matter. A poem with no space is unreadable. A painting with no contrast is flat. A life with no pause is exhausting. But here's the problem. We've been trained to eliminate space. We multitask. We speed up. We fill every moment. When we have 5 seconds of quiet, we pull out our phones. When we're alone, we look for distraction. When we're bored, we panic. We no longer know how to do nothing. Yet science tells us this is exactly what our brain needs. A 2009 study from Stanford University found that heavy multitaskers were actually worse at filtering out irrelevant information, had a harder time switching between tasks, and struggled to focus. We think we're getting more done, but we're actually crowding our brains with clutter, and cluttered minds can't create. What's worse, we start to feel mentally blocked. We get anxious, foggy, tired. We sit down to come up with something new, and nothing comes. It's not that we're out of ideas, it's that there's no room for them to show up. That's where Ma becomes not just a beautiful idea, but a creative necessity. In Japanese culture, Ma isn't just a philosophical concept, it's a way of living, a way of seeing. In traditional No theatre, actors pause, long deliberate silences between lines to build tension and meaning. In Sumi painting, most of the canvas is left untouched, allowing the viewer's imagination to complete the image. In tea ceremonies, the space between each movement is just as important as the movement itself. Ma is everywhere, and it teaches us something powerful. What isn't there is just as important as what is. Think of your brain like a garden. Ideas are seeds. But if the soil is too crowded, overgrown with weeds and distractions, nothing can grow. You need space for roots to stretch. You need silence for signals to be heard. Neuroscientists call this the default mode network. It's the state your brain enters when you're not focused on a task, when you're daydreaming, walking, or resting. And guess what? That's when the brain connects dots. That's when insights happen. A 2012 study from the University of California found that people were more likely to solve creative problems after engaging in undemanding, non-focused tasks. In other words, when the brain is free, it finds answers on its own. But instead of protecting these moments of freedom, we fill them, we check messages, we refresh the feed, we jump to the next task. And slowly, without even realizing it, we lose access to the most powerful part of our own minds. So the question is, why are we so afraid of the empty space? Maybe because silence makes us uncomfortable. Because in the absence of distraction, we're forced to sit with ourselves. No noise, no escape, just us and our thoughts. And that can be overwhelming. But here's the twist. That's also where real creativity lives. The answers you're looking for, they're not buried in another Google search or inside your inbox. They're waiting in the silence you've been avoiding. Ma reminds us of something essential, that empty doesn't mean meaningless. Silence isn't lack, it's potential. It's the space before the first brushstroke, the breath before the leap, the stillness before the breakthrough, and once we understand that, we can begin to honor the void instead of fearing it. We can stop chasing noise and start listening, because maybe, just maybe, your next big idea isn't hiding in the chaos. It's waiting in the calm. And in the next chapter, we'll explore how Ma isn't just something to think about. It's something you can see, feel, and create in the world around you. From architecture to music to your everyday life, Ma is already shaping your experience. You just need to notice it. Ma is not an abstract idea. In Japan, it's alive in spaces, gestures, architecture, art, and even the rhythm of everyday life. You don't just understand Ma, you feel it. And once you do, it's impossible to unsee. You begin to notice how space, real, intentional space, isn't empty. It's expressive. Picture a traditional Japanese room. Tatami mats line the floor. Sliding paper doors, called shoji, filter the sunlight in soft, diffuse waves. The space feels open, uncluttered. There might be a single flower in a vase or a hanging scroll with calligraphy. There's an elegance, a purity in the simplicity. But what strikes you the most is what's not there. And yet that very absence feels full. That's Ma, and that's the point. What's not present is what gives meaning to what is. The renowned Japanese architect Tadao Ando once said, "You need space to find yourself. When you create space, you invite the invisible." Ando designs with light and silence, concrete and emptiness. His buildings aren't filled with lavish decorations. They're shaped by voids, by shadows, by the way the sun moves through an opening. The emotion comes not from excess, but from restraint, from room to breathe. Ma shows up again in traditional Japanese music. Listen to a performance on the shakuhachi, a bamboo flute once used by Zen monks, and you'll hear long, deliberate pauses between notes. The silence isn't a break in the melody, it's part of it. It's a breath. It gives the notes before and after a space to resonate. The music isn't in the sound, it's in the contrast between sound and silence. Theater, too, embraces this. In No, one of the oldest forms of Japanese drama, the pacing is slow, intentional. Actors pause. Nothing is rushed. The stillness becomes heavy, charged. The audience leans into the silence because in it lies the emotion, the anticipation, the depth. Even in traditional ink paintings, sumi-e, ma is essential. Most of the paper is left untouched. A few brushstrokes might depict a mountain or a crane in flight. But the white space isn't background, it's the air, it's movement, it's mystery. It's where the viewer enters the artwork. Without the space, the image would suffocate. All of this tells us something simple yet profound. It's not always about adding more, sometimes it's about taking away. And this idea isn't limited to Japanese art. It applies to how we live, how we think, how we create. The modern mind is constantly overwhelmed. We scroll, consume, react, and we rarely, if ever, stop. The result? Creative burnout, decision fatigue, anxiety. We're so full of input that we can't hear our own thoughts. That's why the science behind creativity has begun to echo what Japanese philosophy has known for centuries. Neuroscientist David Eagleman explains that our brains don't work like machines. They're not at their best when constantly processing input. They need downtime, mental breathing room. Without it, our brains can't sort through what we've taken in. We don't consolidate memories. We don't make connections. We don't generate new ideas. A 2012 study from the University of California found that when the brain is at rest, not actively focused on a task, it lights up in powerful ways. The default mode network becomes active. This network is tied to imagination, memory, empathy, and problem solving. It's where creativity comes from, but it only activates when we're not forcing it. In other words, when we give the mind space, it starts doing its best work, but we don't leave room anymore. We avoid silence. We fear boredom. We pack our schedules and our screens and our minds, and in doing so, we choke the very process we rely on for clarity, originality, and insight. The American Psychological Association reports that this overconnected lifestyle leads to rising levels of anxiety, depression, and creative block. It's not surprising. We've eliminated Ma from our lives, and we're paying the price. And still, we ask, why is emptiness so uncomfortable? Because silence confronts us. When we're not busy, we start to notice what we've been avoiding. In the absence of distraction, our internal voices grow louder. That's when we hear doubt, grief, longing, truth. And yes, that can be difficult, but it's also sacred because those same inner voices are where creativity lives. Not on the surface, but deep inside. And Ma is the invitation to go there, to open the door. Just like a field that needs to lie fallow to regain its strength, the mind needs rest to be fertile. Farmers understand this. If you plant without pause, you deplete the soil. You grow nothing. But give the earth time, let it breathe, and it will bloom again. Creativity works the same way. Artists, designers, architects, musicians, writers, they all know this intuitively. That great ideas don't arrive when forced. They come when you're walking, resting, daydreaming, letting go. The comedian and writer John Cleese spoke about this in his lectures on creativity. He said, "Creativity is not a talent, it's a way of operating, and it requires time, protected time." He emphasized that without protected space, we don't create, we just react. And reaction is the enemy of originality. Austin Kleon, author of Steal Like an Artist, talks about the value of productive boredom. He says it's in the quiet, slow moments, when we're not being entertained, that our best ideas appear. Because the mind left to wander starts to explore. Ma is that wonder. And in Japan, it's not something accidental. It's built into the culture. In a tea ceremony, every movement is slow, every gesture intentional. There's no rush to pour, no hurry to sip. Between the steps, there's space. That space holds meaning. That space is Ma, and what it creates is presence, connection, beauty. When we bring Ma into our daily lives, we begin to shift. We start to listen more deeply. We start to see what we've been missing, and we stop trying to fill every second. Because we begin to understand it's not about escaping the world to find inspiration. It's about making space within it, in your schedule, in your mind, in your home, in your breath. Ma isn't luxury, it's structure, it's support. It's the quiet rhythm beneath all creation. And the best part, you don't need to change everything to invite it in. In the next chapter, we'll explore exactly how to do that, how to create your own Ma, even in a busy, noisy life. You'll see that cultivating this space isn't about doing less. It's about doing with presence, with pause, with power, because in the stillness, everything begins. Creating space is an act of rebellion in a world that constantly demands more. More productivity, more output, more hustle. To stop, to do nothing, even for a moment, feels unnatural, even wrong. But it's not wrong. It's wisdom. And more than that, it's necessary, because in the end, space isn't what slows us down. It's what makes everything else possible. Let's go back to the idea we ended with. Ma isn't a luxury. It's structure. It's the foundation that supports clarity, depth, and original thought. And now that we've explored what Ma is and how it shapes our world, it's time to ask, how do we bring it into our lives, into our routines, into our creative processes? The truth is, you don't need to move to a Zen monastery or unplug for weeks. You can start now, in your own space, in your own time, one breath at a time. Let's begin small. Think about your day. From the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, how many intentional pauses are there? How often do you truly stop between tasks, between conversations, between thoughts? Most of us move from one thing to another in a blur. We finish one call and jump to the next. We answer one message and refresh the inbox again. No space, no breath, just motion. But what if you added a pause? Just a minute. A real minute. 60 seconds of nothing. That's your first Ma. Not a break to check your phone. Not a break to squeeze in another task. A real pause. Close your eyes. Let the silence settle. Let the previous moment end before the next one begins. This is where reset happens, where clarity returns. It's a practice used by elite athletes, Navy SEALs, and top CEOs. People in high-stress, high-performance environments use deliberate pauses to stay focused, to recharge between decisions, to reconnect with their intention. And you can do the same. Second, walk without purpose. Without music, without a podcast, without your phone. Just walk. Let your mind drift. Let the world unfold around you. This isn't a productivity hack. It's an opening. A study published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology found that people who walked aimlessly, just letting their minds wander, saw up to a 60% boost in creativity. Why? Because your brain, unpressured and in motion, starts to form new connections on its own. When you remove the pressure to produce, your mind finally feels free to imagine. Third, protect your silence. Find a moment, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you can, to disconnect from everything. No screens, no talking, no music, just sit, be still, not to meditate, not to fix anything, just to listen. What you'll notice is that the first layer of thoughts will be loud, tasks, worries, memories. But then something beautiful happens. They begin to slow down, to fade, and in that quiet, something new begins to surface. A voice you hadn't heard in a long time. That voice is your inner knowing, your intuition, and it only speaks when you're silent enough to hear it. Fourth, simplify your physical space. Look around the room you're in. How many things are demanding your attention? How many notifications, objects, cluttered corners? Your physical environment is a mirror of your mental space. A crowded room leads to a crowded mind. You don't need to become a minimalist. Just begin by clearing one surface. One wall, one corner. Create space for your eyes to rest. Create space for your thoughts to slow. In Japanese aesthetics, there's a concept called yohaku no bi, the beauty of empty space. It's the understanding that blankness itself is beautiful, that a room, a painting, or even a moment doesn't have to be full to be meaningful. That applies to your calendar too. Leave a blank spot in your day, not a scheduled break, a real gap, an invitation for spontaneity. You might find that in those unclaimed minutes, something unexpected shows up, a thought, a feeling, an idea that was hiding behind all your plans. Fifth, reframe how you see doing nothing. We've been conditioned to think that idle time is wasted time, that if we're not achieving something measurable, we're falling behind. But doing nothing, truly doing nothing, is a creative act. It's a radical act. because in that nothing, everything begins. Just like soil needs time to rest to grow strong crops, your mind needs time to breathe. This isn't laziness, this is preparation. This is the fertile void where imagination plants roots. Harvard Medical School published a study in 2011 showing that short, consistent moments of mindfulness, even just being still and quiet, can increase the density of gray matter in the brain. This improves memory, empathy, and emotional regulation, and all it takes is silence, stillness, ma. When you choose to create space, you're not falling behind, you're getting ready. Steve Jobs took long walks to think. Beethoven walked alone, even in storms, to find his melodies. Darwin stepped away from his desk into his garden to let ideas surface. They weren't wasting time. They were making space for brilliance to arrive. You can do the same. Let go of the pressure to always be thinking, always be producing, always be performing. Choose instead to be present, to be still, to allow. Because here's the truth. Your mind doesn't need more information. It needs room. It needs air. It needs silence. It needs ma. Start with one pause, one breath, one walk without a destination. One pocket of quiet in the noise, because in those small openings, something incredible happens. Your mind begins to speak in ways it couldn't before. New ideas appear, not because you chase them, but because you finally stopped long enough for them to catch up with you. Ma is not emptiness. It's a vessel. It holds your next insight, your next solution, your next breakthrough, but only if you give it space. So clear the room, turn down the noise, and listen to the silence. Because in that silence between one thought and the next is the beginning of everything.